Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time for Gathering the Roll, the only news program supported by the Empire. Exciting and fantastic news from the worlds of Magic the Gathering and other collectible card games and role-playing games such as Dungeons & Dragons, Shadowrun, and Pathfinder. So let's, of course, start with our collectible card game news, beginning with Magic the Gathering. So in Magic the Gathering news, the Aether Revolt spoiler season has begun. So not only are they beginning to spoil a lot of the cards from the set, letting you know what's going to be coming out, but the new trailer for the set has been released. I will link that in the description below. They've also revealed all the various mechanics / keywords that are going to be out. Of course, we're continuing with energy counters and vehicles from the previous one, but they've got two new keywords. Revolt, which involves, it's a special ability that involves when a card would leave the battlefield from your control, some kind of effect occurs. So if I have something in play, it leaves the battlefield from my control, something happens with the Revolt ability. And the other one is Improvise. This is a special ability that you can tap artifacts in replacement of colorless mana when it comes to casting an artifact with the Improvise ability. Effectively, it allows you to use artifacts in place of mana cost when casting a card with Improvise on it. Now, in tournament news, there are two Magic tournaments going over this weekend. First is the Grand Prix Louisville, Kentucky, a Legacy Constructed tournament going on over this weekend. The other tournament is the Super Sunday Series Championships 2017, taking place at Wizard of the Coast headquarters. So you can see the list of folks that have been invited to that, competing in this competition, trying to get some more prestige out in the Magic world. Check it out if you are interested in seeing about it. Now, moving on into other CCG news, which I'm letting you know I'm going to be expanding CCG from everything from Pokemon to Yu-Gi-Oh! To Cardfight Vanguard and everything in between. If it's a collectible card game, I'm going to try to give you some news on it. So let's still move on, though, to Vampire the Eternal Struggle. Now, it has technically been out of print since 2010, but at the upcoming World of Darkness convention in Berlin, White Wolf has approved a limited release print of 100 cards, including reprints of many famous cards from the previous sets and a few new ones that they're going to be giving people that are participating in the Vampire the Eternal Struggle tournament that's going on at this convention. So the big Vampire the Eternal Struggle tournament's going on. If you're participating in it, you can get this special limited release printing, at least one copy of it, possibly more. You can enjoy these cards, which haven't been, as I said, there hasn't been a printed version since 2010. But it's 100 cards, they're giving them out in sets. Registration for this begins on the 10th of this month. So this is going to be taking place later on in the year, of course. This, of course, is taking place later on this year, but you can sign up and join in if you can be in Berlin for the convention, and you can get this special set, Anthology. So moving on to other collectible card game news, of course in Cardfight Vanguard news, the Revival Collection Volume 1 is now out, which you can get, and it contains an anthology of previously printed very popular cards, including some cards which have never been printed in English, since it is, of course, a Japanese collectible card game originally. So now it's your chance to get a bunch of these cards that were never printed like that. Let's move on, though, from collectible card game news onto role-playing game news. So the only big thing this week in role-playing game news is Earth Dawn continues their previews of High Circle characters, building up for their Player's Compendium that's going to be coming out later on this year. They previewed both the Sky Raider and the Wizard. Of course, the Sky Raider being the fearsome warriors and focusing on their battle prowess, and for the Wizards focusing on glyph magic and the abilities that they get at High Circles from 9th to 15th. So you can check them out online. You can also be anticipating the new Player's Compendium that is going to be coming out later on this year. Let's move on to board game news. So Fantasy Flight has begun to preview their new first major expansion for Mansions of Madness, Beyond the Threshold. Previously, there hasn't been any major expansions for this game, and now they're finally coming out with the first one, so they're beginning to preview some materials for it that they're going to be planning to release it later on this year. So expect some great things from Beyond the Threshold coming out later on, especially if you're a fan of Mansions of Madness. Now, in other board games news, an expansion for the game Cult Express has come out. The Marshals and Prisoners expansion. This allows optional rules for one of the players to take on the role of the Marshal rather than all of you being criminals, and it adds a new train car, a prison train car where the Marshal can throw some of the criminals into, and other criminals may or may not want to break their buddies out. You know, friendly rivalry might help distract the Marshal. They'll find out if it's useful or not. So that's it for the news for this week. Links to any of these news stories and any of the new products that are coming out will be, of course, in the description below. Remember, this Saturday at 1 p.m. EST at www.twitch.tv/Tantus and Dracovin, we will, of course, be discussing many of these major news stories and more in discussing Tabletop. If you have any questions you'd like us, or questions or topics you'd like us for us to discuss, you can always leave them in the comments below here and we'll reach them there. If you have any other sort of basic questions that you just want me to answer, of course, you can also leave those in the description below and I will discuss them and these other news stories to the best of my abilities. Remember, of course, to like, subscribe, and share the news. It's always important to share the news. If you want to show some extra support for the channel, you can always check out my Patreon link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.